This week's Parsha is found in Genesis, the 32nd chapter. Am I correct? And we're going to be starting with verse 4. Verse 4. The first three words of this Parsha is actually what the Parsha is called. It says, Vayishlach Yaakov Melachim, which means that Yaakov sent emissaries or sent angels. The title of this lecture is Dealing with the Outsider Families and following up with disputes and arguments, and also how to bring your Torah wisdom in a very wise way to people who don't get your Torah wisdom. And so we'll be examining just a couple of ideas that come from this. It says in the first first verse that we're going to read of the Parsha, it says, Then Jacob sent angels ahead of him as to Esaw his brother, to the land of Seir. Seir is a mountainous region that is runs south of the Dead Sea, going toward the Red Sea. He says, the field of Edom. He charged them, saying, Thus shall you say to my lord, to Esaw, So said your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban, and have lingered until now. I have acquired oxen and donkeys and flocks of servants and men servants, and I am sending to tell you, my Lord, to find favor in your eyes. It says the angels returned to Jacob, saying, We have come to your brother, to Esaw. Moreover, he is heading towards you, and 400 men are with him. A bit disturbing text to open up to, but he knew it was coming, right? He knew from the time that he took the covenant and he fled on his way, spending 73 or 74 years away from his brother. He knew he had to face the giant at some point in his life. It is interesting, though, we see that Yaakov seems to be a bit concerned. The question by the sages is it appropriate for us to think that a righteous, or a tzaddik, a righteous man, would have fear? I mean, would it really be fear? Would he not have bitachon, trust in God? What was going on? Was it real, true lack of faith? I don't think that that's the case. I think what we see is any true righteous man, a tzaddik, always feels a bit less than what he really is. And all of them have a bit of self-doubt, not in the Creator, but in themselves. What we see that Yaakov might be concerned about is that something that he had done to not merit that level of protection by Hashem. It wasn't about the merits of God being able to do it, or whether God could do it. It was the fact that, what just in case I have not conducted myself at the highest level of integrity, and what if when Esau comes, he allows Esau to overcome me and take over. And what we see is the first point in how to deal with exiled, difficult relationships in your life, including family members and friends. The first thing to do is you have to deal with it on a spiritual level rather than a physical level. It is important. Many times the relationships that we're dealing with are much more powerfully physically and much more ruthless, and that if you were to try to engage head to head, face to face with these individuals, it could leave you hurt and character destroyed. It could mean nothing good could come out of it. A reason why is a person who operates at Torah, at the level of Musar ethics, Torah ethics, you're not going to be brutal. You're not a brutal person. However, you realize that there is a time to stand up and make a stand on a certain issue, and you know you have to do it with boldness and put your trust in God. But in general, you're not going to brutalize the other individual that you're attempting to have somewhat of a restorative relationship with. And what we see happening is Yaakov sends angels. It's an interesting concept. We've talked about how that on the night that Yaakov wrestles with the angel, what angel is he wrestling with? Do you remember? Esau's angel, right? So at some level, Yaakov was able to, at some high level of ability during meditation and prayer, able to make contact with his angel and to test out the situation to see what was going to happen. At some level, intimidating within the spiritual realm that angel that controlled or had power to influence Esaw. So we understand this concept that many of you are very familiar with, and it's the idea of instead of having warfare in physicality, to develop your warfare in spirituality. Number one, by being at the highest level of your righteousness. And number two, by engaging the divine, to be able to make contact with the divine and ask for divine help in a situation. You and I both know that we've probably done this on a regular basis. But this is the heart of true Torah wisdom, that many times battles cannot be fought and won solely on the physical realm. We understand this as well from even our current great wise rabbis of our modern age, who talk about the necessity of the Jewish people during the time of all of the struggles in Israel at this time with the stabbings and ruthless violence, that the answer to this isn't more armies, more soldiers, more conquering of territory. It's really about a territory that is within the neshama of every Jew, and that is to somehow conquer our evil inclination and begin to build up the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, begin to do mitzvahs, study more Torah, read more Tehillim, Psalms, do more prayer. It is that which we do in the spiritual will help to abate many of the things in the physical world. We all know that our beautiful wives and our spouses are meant as a prodding effort. That reminds us that we need to make some transformation and change. God brings about Esaw to bring about the perfection of Yaakov. We see this. So what does Yaakov do when he hears there are 400 men on their way? He develops a very genius strategy, which is something that we're going to learn from in this wisdom. First of all, and it says he does this all in one night. And we know he does this in one night because the text uses a very interesting phrase. And let's find it real quick. He says, trying to find it in the text, guys. You'll find it before I do. Right before he lays down. Divides the family. Say again? 23? Sorry, normally I have the book up here and it's not as easy to... Okay. But he got up that night and took 2 wives. Okay, so we see this phrase. It said, he spent the night in the camp, and it says, but he got up that night. We have a repetitive of this phrase, so we understand that several things are going on at one time. The several things that are getting ready to happen are the division of his families, making sure that in the military, you don't allow a military to overrun you, so separating them out in such a strategic way so not to get overrun was very important. He took his wives, put them on one side, he put his servants and flocks on another. He's preparing himself. He's doing what he can do in the physical world, physicality, right? What can he do? Well, he's aware of probably combat tactics that his father and grandfather would have taught. So he understood that if you can't find us, you can't kill us, right? So we're going to hide them, put them away. Next, he's going to make sure his family's secure. You secure the most important asset. And then it says that he ends up going across the ford to find himself in a quiet place to pray. There he gets in contact with divine essence. And at that point, It wasn't a ladder going up and down that he sees these angels coming up. What kind of experience he has? But a man comes up and he starts fighting this man, this angel of Esaw. He fights him all night, and he goes into a battle in the spiritual realm. Now, when you think about this for a moment, you're going to go, okay, Rod, how am I going to battle? Am I supposed to try to call the angel of this individual out there in the world that I'm having troubles with and got to fight their angel? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in a time of hitparadut, personal prayer, that you really spend time wrestling with concepts and ideas that have brought about this dysfunctional relationship and how you're to conquer it. Conquer it in the spiritual realm. Conquer it in the realm of building your character and changing your character. Conquer it by trying to have divine guidance on the strategy, on how to be able to deal with this situation. Yaakov knew that he couldn't fight this battle. This was not the time to fight this type of a battle. The emotions were too raw. But at the same time, there's a connection to the end of days and Edom and Judah coming together for a major battle and a fight. And at some level, he also understood that this was not the time for this sort of last end of days showdown. It just wasn't the time. So his strategy becomes quite interesting. Let's go back to chapter 34, and he says, part of his strategy here is what verse did we leave off of when we came down? Verse 5? Let's see. See 7, the angels, and verse 7. Okay. So, continuing on, would someone like to read, starting with verse 7? (32:7). I'm sorry, 32:7. Sorry about that, guys. It was Esau's angel. Confused me. Okay.
The angels returned to Jacob. 6:7, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The angels returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother, to Esaw. Moreover, he is heading toward you, and 400 men are with him."
Okay, the first thing we hear is what they're telling him, this isn't pretty. Okay, it wasn't like, hey, we went to your brother, everything's cool, he can't wait to meet you. No, he's got 400 men with you, and the intention is to kill you or destroy you. So go ahead.
Jacob became very frightened, and it distressed him. So he divided the people with him, and the flocks, cattle, and camels into 2 camps. For he said, if Esau comes to the one camp and strikes it down, then the remaining camp shall survive. Then Jacob said, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Hashem, who said to me, return to your land and to your relatives, and I will do good with you. I have been diminished by all the kindness and by all the truth that you have done your servant. For with my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Okay,
well, hold on right here. We talked about the fear of Yaakov. Is it real fear? It's not the fear that he doesn't believe God is capable or will do what he says he's going to do. He's concerned that during his sojourning with Laban, that somehow he had weakened himself, spiritually gotten to a place where he's too weak to be able to do what he's got to do. That's what we're talking about. Second thing, he threw himself upon God's mercy. One of the things that we have to learn about fighting physicality, difficulties in physicality, is putting 100% trust in Hashem in the spiritual realm. It's by coming to Him and saying, look, you have made promises to your people. There are things that you said that you would do if we would do our part. The psalmist David is amazing psalms to read through the psalms, and he reminds God with such incredible boldness. Like if you allow my enemies to destroy me, who will worship you, right? I mean, that's pretty bold stuff, right? But it's that same level of boldness that we see Yaakov approach Hashem, and he says, look, you're the one who said that you would be with me. You're the one who said that you would feed me. You're the one that said that you would never leave me. Now I have returned to you. I've come back. I need your help. I've crossed this water. I've set a divide. I've done everything I could to protect my family, my livestock, my possessions. But at this point, without your help, I cannot do it. I cannot. I've done everything I could. So let's examine for a moment about the preparation for this type of battle. And just save that place so we know where to go next. Let's first talk about what we can do. What is within our physical realm to do? We know very well that many of us do a good job at messing things up, right? So we're talking about doing things that have been executed according to Torah wisdom. Things that you can know that you are capable of doing. For example, let's say that you have a terrible relationship or a difficult relationship with another person. Don't create a bigger problem by doing something that is overreaching or overreacting. It's better to do what Yaakov does, at least pull yourself back. Don't put yourself in a position to be hurt or anybody around you hurt. That's number one. Number two is, in the preparation, prepare yourself to guard, prepare the environment to guard yourself against whatever difficulties that might be in this relationship. Guard yourself. But don't forget that ultimately these things can be conquered through spiritual means. This is what's amazing. It's almost like this secret weapon that a person who's really connected to Hashem has. You're having a difficulty with someone on the job. It's not about you dealing with it face to face and going to put this person in their place. Or if you're having a difficulty with someone, one of your children or a spouse or a cousin or in-law, something that is very difficult, going at it in the level of physicality only is just going to create a disaster. This is about a spiritual approach. The spiritual approach is, Yaakov reminds himself that he has dedicated himself to God. He's dedicated himself to doing what God wants him to do, and that is to return to the land and to raise a family. But in response to this human crisis, this potential destruction, Jacob falls upon the strong arms of God. He just falls on them. It's called the ultimate level of trusting God. There are other comments that I want to approach real quick about what you can do to prepare yourself. According to Rashi, Yaakov was concerned that he had committed a sin, not a sin like you and I think, but some had committed maybe an act that may have not made him worthy. And within that, it says others commented that the sin that concerned him was his approach to Esaw. Did he really handle the situation with Esaw right? Now, I don't know about you, but have you ever had a situation in which you know that you probably didn't contribute to the destruction of a relationship, but you second-guess your actions and your motives? Not a bad idea. A righteous man looks back and goes, maybe I made a mistake with my brother. Maybe if I wouldn't have approached it this way, this wouldn't have happened. Right before class started, we were having a discussion about Abraham, and there's a point within Jewish wisdom that says that whenever you send someone away, especially like an employer to an employee, that you always make sure that you give them a gift, take care of, do something kind to them as an act of kindness, chesed, before they leave, so that they don't leave with anger and bitterness and resentment towards you. And we're looking at a whole group of people, a people class called the Arabs, who are the Ishmaelites, descendants of Ishmael, who was sent out of Abraham's camp with not a single blessing, except for the one that you're going to be a big nation and you'll battle and fight and feud over each other. I mean, what a blessing that was, right? And the reality is sometimes you have to count your actions and consider them. It seems that maybe that's what Esaw was doing. Rambam also discusses, in Yesodi HaTorah in 10:4, he says, discusses the rule of the sages that God never withdraws a prophecy to do good. Brachos 7a. If so, how could Yaakov have doubted the divine promise to protect him? Rambam explains that this dictum applies only to a public prophecy, but not to a privately or to an individual. God's promises to Yaakov, such as a prophecy, is subject to a continued worthiness of the recipient. Pretty interesting ideas. The reason why that we need to go back and second check our actions and our behavior is sometimes a promise of blessing can be withheld because we've not exercised those negative midots, intentions of our character outside of us. Rav Hirsch says this, notes that the contrast between Yaakov's confidence during his years with Laban and his fear at this time. Yaakov knew that Esau was personally injured by Yaakov, and this might influence God to take piety on Esau. So there is some evidence here that he's having to do some self-reflection. The next part of this element to restoring a relationship, and when I say restore, it doesn't mean you're all buddy-buddy again, but restoring it back to civility means self-reflection. Not about what the other person needs to do, but what have I done? Serious self-reflection to find out how you should approach things. Now, could you continue reading?
Verse 12, rescue me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him lest he come and strike me down, mother and children. And you had said, I will surely do good with you, and I will make your offspring like the sand of the sea, which is too numerous to count. He spent the night there, then he took from that which had come in his hand a tribute to Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 nursing camels. 16?
No,
Oh, okay. It's 30. All right, camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 she-donkeys and 10 he-donkeys.
Okay, we get the point. A lot of produce, a lot of money is being exchanged. Here's the other component to restoring relationship. It's always good to get on the good side of a person you're having difficulties with, ingratiate them with physical blessings. Ingratiate them. Be kind to them. If you want to heal a relationship, there's nothing, the other, thank God no one's, Miss Green in the back has never offended me, nor have I her, but she ingratiated us with a gift one day, and it's been one of my favorite gifts. It's a big iron griddle. Remember? Do you remember buying that for me? We use it almost every Shabbos, but in preparation of our food, and always have wonderful feelings toward Charlie because of that what would seem to her like insignificant, but it always makes our Shabbos cooking a pleasure to have this. And that's with a good relationship. Can you imagine in a relationship that has struggled to all of a sudden receive great blessings, either favorable words or actions or financial gifts or whatever it may be to help sort of heal a relationship? This is a major thing. The tribute here to show his goodwill is and reiterate his subservience. Yaakov sends this lavish tribute, actually a series of tributes. It's interesting because he lined them up to where they didn't all show up at one time. They kind of trickled over the horizon for hours. Esau is seeing these gifts come to him. And to hope that Esau would sort of assuage his wrath, that somehow Esau, if he was going to try to kill him, he'd go, hold on a second, what's happening here? Change the whole environment. In times when Israel is powerless to fight its enemies, it must forego the luxury of asserting that cause is just. Instead, it must appease its enemies in terms that they, in their greed, can comprehend. Interesting concept. Israel, sort of one of their strategies, as you know, and it frustrates the secular mindset, is when you have an enemy, why do you want to try to appease them in any way? You try to do everything you can. Israel tries to do everything they can not to have a war, right? Can you think about this? During the Gaza war, just recently, Israel was supplying the whole sector with power. They had not paid their power bill like in 7 years. Not once. Why didn't they shut their power off? These are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Why is it that during the war itself, Israel was supplying medical supplies? Truckloads of medical supplies going into Gaza. Any other army would have tried to cut them off and dry them up on the stake. Why does Israel do that? Because it goes back to this time of Yaakov, who says, here is my potential enemy, but I'm going to do everything I can to soften the blow, somehow change the direction of their anger and their frustration. The Radak comments by saying that by not appearing to him, God was implying to Yaakov that even the most righteous people should not rely on God's miraculous intercessions, but should be vigilant to make rational preparation. So even in this whole time of calling out on God and crying out to Hashem, you've got to help me. I've done everything that I possibly could do. He thought, I could do one more thing. I could send him this huge amount of wealth, transfer it over to him, and at some level, Yaakov is telling Esaw, you deserved better than what you got. Do you see that? Incredible act. Even though Yaakov could have had plenty of pride and said, look, I deserve this because the old man gave it to me. Instead, he ingratiates himself. Verse 14, it says, from that which had come in his hand, Yaakov selected his gift from the livestock that he had accumulated during the years of his unremitting labor. The most effective gift is one which has cost you a tremendous amount of time and effort. The psalmist David Hamelech says, when he has prepared the threshing floor and they were getting ready to give offerings, he says, I will not, because the guy says, I'll give you all the cattle you want to do your offerings. And what does he say? He says, I will not present any sacrifice that hasn't cost me something. So giving a cheap gift doesn't work. Okay, so let's move on. They drove separately across the top of the mountain. Obviously, Esaw is impressed by it. Esau's reaction is, I've got plenty of sheep and I don't need your stuff, right? But he took it, but he's saying, I don't need it. You know what? This was not necessary. And at some level, Yaakov was humbled. Not Yaakov, Esaw was humbled by this action. Because as you see in the conversation, it says they embrace each other. Now, one midrash says that his intention was to bite his ear off, but instead of biting his ear off, he kisses him. Totally changes the whole dynamic of the event. What did it take to change the dynamic? 100% relied on Yaakov doing everything right. 100%. That is, doing all the preparations, making sure that you don't do anything to incite worse violence, making sure that you protect your family, go to God and pray, seriously put a lot of personal prayer in it, asking God for divine instruction. And then on top of that, you do everything right by also ingratiating yourself to the person that you're having a difficult time or struggle with. The Chofetz Chaim used to say the evil inclination doesn't mind if a person fasts or prays or gives charity all day long, providing he does not study the Torah. Abraham represented kindness and Isaac represented service. Kindness and service are two of the three indispensable pillars of the world, of Avos 1:2 states. But the third pillar, Torah, is the crucial one for Israel's success in carrying out its mission on the earth. Yaakov represented the Torah, and without it, Israel will fail. That is why Hasatan did not confront Abraham and Isaac, only Yaakov. With that being said, we learn some very valuable lessons, is that our life has to be driven by one thing, and that is the highest value of Torah and Torah ethics. I believe I expressed this to you guys earlier about a conversation I had with Rabbi Richmond. And I was expressing to him the beauty of this community and the fact that you guys operate at the highest level of ethics and Torah wisdom, and that everything in your life is at that level. Therefore, we don't have lashon hara, evil speech. We don't have people backbiting. No one destroys another person. Everyone judges favorably of another person. We're very careful about how we approach our relationships with great kindness and graciousness. And it makes a world of difference. It's wonderful to be in a group of people like yourselves. And what drives that are these very principles that we learn that is Jewish wisdom. You look at the story, and if you read it, you think, oh, it's a great history lesson. But no, we learn some very valuable, practical lessons on human relationships, how to restore relationships with a brother, a broken family member. How do you do that? This is how you approach it. And with these lovely lessons, we understand that broken relations can be restored through the wisdom of Torah and also through deep prayer and meditation. That concludes this shiur, this lecture. Anybody have questions or comments? Now's the time to do so.